Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. So that whole TBC thing, I was thinking about it the other day. How on earth do you fit the population of Classic into Outland in a way that makes it not totally crowded 24/7? I mean, at launch, sure, it's going to be completely wild, but even a few months down the line, how's it going to look if Classic has proven to be so popular and how many players it's retained? Let me share some speculations about how people are going to power level themselves on day one, because they will do. It's in people's nature on MMOs, and I kind of like guessing this stuff as well to see if I can get any of it right. First of all, if Blizzard underestimate the popularity of TBC as they did with Classic and as they did with Vanilla itself back in the day, somewhat ironically, they always seem to underestimate the player base. Anyway, if they do exactly that again and lowball server capacity for day one, getting through the Dark Portal itself may prove to be as much of a challenge as it did back on day one in TBC itself, which I just so happen to have done a video about TBC's new content as a whole if you're interested, but the TLDR is that it was a laggy server crashing mess of a bottleneck. It may prove to be so again, but let's say we do get straight on through to our lovely new continent and Hellfire Peninsula. Now, do you remember what the opening quests involved there for both Horde and Alliance? They are your old faithful kill and collect quests, of course. Competition on the ground will be insane. Just picture it alongside Classic's launch for a second. In Classic, there was a huge population across 6 different starting zones, and for many, it lagged, servers crashed, and it was just generally unplayable. Imagine that sheer volume of players, and now we have to put all of them into one zone. That's what we're dealing with on day one of TBC. Now, I expect there to be a TBC beta, during which time the most hardcore of the hardcore will undoubtedly be heading into early dungeons such as Hellfire Ramparts in hopes of working out the most efficient way to farm through the entire thing. I mean, spell cleaves have always been a popular thing in Classic, especially in the early days. TBC will very much be a repeat of this trend. We're not going to have the one pull madness anymore, however, as in TBC, should it be launched on a later patch, there are AoE caps to many spells where they will not exceed their maximum base damage split across a large number of mobs. I'll go over this in a bit more detail at a later date, but yeah, those mages you see these days doing Maridon 1 pulls or ZG 11 or 12 packs or however many it is won't be a thing anymore in TBC. Warlocks may be able to bring it back in spell cleaves with Seed of Corruption though, we'll have to see. How about this then? Instead of risking or going through the Dark Portal or the somewhat inevitable instant crashes in Hellfire Ramparts, it's surely going to happen, right? How many groups are going to try and ball straight into that dungeon? Doesn't seem like the play, in my opinion. Maybe people will ride straight through Hellfire Peninsula over to Zangarmarsh. There are also quests there that can be picked up at level 60 according to some TBC databases that I'm able to find. Alternatively, maybe you head straight into Coilfang Reservoir, doing the Underbog and Slave Pens, which will be completely fine to do at level 60. Keep in mind too that a 5-man group in Naxxramas gear are going to be like level 60 twinks. The power level of Naxxramas gear is completely off the charts. A 60 in Nax gear will be comparable to a level 70 in starter raid gear. It really is that powerful. Aside from this though, what if people just didn't risk Hellfire or even the Dark Portal and just farmed out vanilla dungeons? I mean, they're still level 60 content, will still grant decent XP. Surely that's a good option to skip out all the lag and the risk of trying to get through the portal early. The gamble here is that the portal and Hellfire Peninsula are actually working by the time you're level 62 though. And on a side note, will we have a full rested XP bar once the levels are extended from 60 to 70? Or is rested XP only granted when you do have an XP bar? Couldn't find an answer to this. Either way, vanilla dungeon grinding just may end up being the play. We'll see. Next thing on the list here, server sizes and faction balance. Now, I've done a whole video on faction balance too going into TBC. Changes would probably make the game better, especially from a PvP perspective. As to whether we get any, quite doubtful, but hey, we'll see. The point here is that on the majority of servers, that there is quite a slant towards a certain faction, and for many servers, the Horde are going to be getting many new players with their overall more competitive racials, as well as Blood Elves and Paladins, because people care about performance and doing well, which is normal enough, I think. However, this is not making faction balance, which is already not really in a good place, even better. In fact, it'll be in a worse one. That's not ideal. Except this will be more of a problem come TBC than it currently is in vanilla. Even if we took the exact populations as of Classic now and ported them into TBC, faction balance would be massively higher on people's discussions when it comes to the game. In fact, I think it would be an even hotter topic than bots are at the moment, because it would be more impactful to the average person's time. in-game, especially on PvP servers. There are several reasons for this. TBC has 7 zones, Classic has about 40 or so. Now, when I mention this, of course you can't compare them on a 1-to-1 scale because Classic is comprised of 60 levels worth of content, TBC is 10. Classic has the whole progression of leveling and its systems hopping from one zone to the next or coming back to a zone at a later date, whilst TBC is far more linear. You complete one zone and then move on to the next. On top of this, how many endgame zones does Classic have? Eastern Plagueland, Silithus, Winterspring, Burning Steppes maybe, just include the Black Lotus zones. Even then, Feralist is always busy due to Dire Maul. There's always plenty of Horde and Kargath in the Badlands. Searing Gorge is on the way to Blackrock Mountain. It's kind of hard to say what exactly is a late game or endgame zone in Classic. Well, there are of course many other players sitting in capitals raid logged with their buffs as well. I think overall the players, at least when they're in the open world, are quite spread out overall. Many lower level zones have players farming in them for items, golden pearls from Ashara, Plague Bloom and Fellcloth from Felwood, fishing from, well, everywhere really. There are so many reasons to be in a wide variety of zones, not just the endgame zones, so to speak. In TBC, this isn't so much the case. All players of all levels will be in all zones all of the time, which sounds like a good thing. Maybe it is, but I think it's going to be a pretty bad experience on PvP servers. Imagine this, right? Your first leveling zone as a human in Classic is Northshire Valley. No PvP tag, even on PvP servers, no gathering nodes there, tame neutral mobs, a very relaxed and slow-paced introduction to the game. Just what you need. Your first leveling zone in TBC is Hellfire Peninsula, PvP tagged, aggressive mobs, level cap players with flying who will be after the same gathering nodes that you are swooping out the sky to delete you, dungeons, heroic dungeons, and even a raid all in your first zone. Imagine having rich thorium veins in Naxxramas outside of Northshire Abbey, because that's sort of the comparison you could make here. That doesn't sound all too appealing, to be honest. Especially when leveling alts or coming into the game a bit later on, and you can bet that players with flying will compete with leveling players for herb and mining in every single zone of TBC. This is the second big change. With less zones, there is just more in every zone to make up for it. So whichever zone you are in, there are incentives for players who are level capped to be there, who will be after those same items that you are. Not just the gathering items like fellweed from herbalism or fell iron ore from mining, which are used for many items in blacksmithing and engineering, which will of course be in immense demand for a long time even after launch, given how many players will be leveling new professions. And one more thing about professions actually, they are even more important in TBC than they are in Classic. Just for some examples, your best two-handed weapons for certain classes come from blacksmithing, and many people will be power leveling alchemy to be making primal might as soon as possible, which itself is used in all kinds of endgame profession items. On top of this, there are the 3 towers as a world PvP objective, which when all of them are held by one faction, that faction will get a 5% damage boost in the zone, as well as the dungeons there. And there are also quests related to taking these as well, which I bet are going to be a real struggle for one faction on certain servers. And there's also world PvP objectives in Negron 2 at Halar. Anyways, just in Hellfire Peninsula alone, there are 3 dungeons, including heroic dungeons, those being Hellfire Ramparts, Blood Furnace and Shattered Halls, a raid, McTheridan's Lair, and a world boss which can only be accessed with Flying Doom Lord Kazak. Those are many reasons for a level cap player to be active in what is technically your starter zone for the expansion. If you ever had an issue with ganking in Classic, you can multiply this by 10, and that's how things are going to look in TBC. Not even just at the start of the expansion either. I expect this to go on for months and months, potentially the duration of the entire thing. And TBC gives us more reasons to go out in the world than Classic ever did as well, and far more regularly at that. What do you leave your major city for in Classic? For the majority of people, farm gold, world buff, and raids. That's it really. In TBC we have dailies, which are, as the name suggests, daily, and many people will be completing those to earn various rewards that they give. Now, I should point out that dailies are very unlikely to be in the game from launch, and the first batch of them will likely come with phase 2 of TBC, and that's just based upon the actual content pacing of TBC itself here. But with dailies, you go to a zone, and they're pretty much all kill and gather type quests, your usual MMO affairs really. And that creates a competition between Alliance and Horde players, or even competition in your own faction. So whether you are a minority faction on your server, Horde or Alliance, PvP realms look like they're going to be quite the struggle. I mean, sure, there's PvP on PvP servers, but you have to understand by now there's no rule set, there's no hidden code of honor. People don't just go out of their way to engage you in PvP, but if you've seen the extent people go to dispel world buffs in Classic, then you can bet people will literally do anything within their power to annoy or cause inconvenience. Strange really, it's as if they see people transferring off PvP servers as a win, but then there's less people to annoy. They slowly kill their own enjoyment of the game. On top of all this, we have flying, which means if little Jimmy gets home from school after getting bad marks in maths and fancies a nice 8-hour ganking session to make up for it, that's going to be extremely easy to do. Artisan flying is 280% speed, remember, there is no getting away from that without your own equally fast mount. I don't know how many different ways people will come up with creative ways to be annoying, but ganking is one of those ways which I can almost say will be a certainty, as well as the open world resources and world objectives. PvP servers are going to be absolutely brutal in TBC for sure, and some people will be into that. Best of luck to them, but I'd be pretty wary if you're in a minority faction at the moment. In fact, as a person who currently plays Alliance on a Horde majority PvP server, and who is going to be continuing to play Alliance in TBC, I don't see a scenario where I would willingly remain on a PvP server with the knowledge that I am in the minority and expect the increased levels of activity in the open world for all zones for the entire duration of the expansion really. It's not that I don't mind a bit of world PvP, especially the group versus group stuff, but if I'm going to have to enter an open world battleground every time I go to Sketis or the Neverwing Shelf, that doesn't really sound like my cup of tea. I remember Terran Merle versus South Shore, and I remember getting tired of it after a few days. Sure, those two things aren't on the same scale, but it's going to be the same kind of spirit behind the activity, isn't it? And to top it off, in TBC, there is no reprieve from the open world PvP like we had with Battlegrounds coming early in Classic. I think PvE servers are going to see a huge number of transfers, if not pre-launch, then shortly after people get a feeling firsthand of TBC PvP servers. And because of the smaller landmass, massive population, and huge resource competition for every zone, I expect layering, a lot of layering. More layers than we saw in Classic for sure. I think my server had between 4 to 6 early on. Even now, my server's still locked and has 2 layers. And now, for all intents and purposes, it's a bit of a content drought in Classic whilst we wait for Phase 5 and AQ to be announced. TBC, no exaggeration, could be layered for the entire expansion. Well, I guess that's a lot of Doomlord Kazakh and Doomwalkers then, isn't it? I think if Classic is anything to go by, that it's been a lot more than a brief nostalgia trip that so many expected it to be. Despite how wonky it is with its lackluster specs, world buff metas and so on, it's still hugely popular. There is clearly a demand for this kind of old school MMO, and TBC just has more to do in terms of dailies, achievements, reputations for keys, heroic, the rewards, the tabards, more mounts and so on. A much more expanded endgame basically. I think it will retain an even larger volume of players once the dust settles. It's just, given everything I've just said, how on earth will it cope with a sheer volume of players? Will Blizzard really take the number of returning players seriously this time? And how will things look on PvP servers then compared to now? Let's hope Blizzard puts some serious consideration into it and does its best to get it right, because it's going to be a massive challenge. In any event, we have a while left in Classic, I'm sure. Just had this on my mind, so I wanted to give it a little talk over. Let me know your thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video very soon. If you like what you see, give the video a like and subscribe, as there'll be plenty more to come. Take care guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.